In our last episode, we were chatting about fear and what is it like when you're afraid but have to do it anyway. And you and I have been talking about this ever since because this theory of like doing it anyway or this action is actually so present in our lives.
Yeah, we were preparing for this episode and we realized we both feel fear every single day of our life, multiple times throughout the day, and we still act in spite of that fear. Now, that wouldn't really be a good conversation because we would go all over the place. But one of the fears that came up for us again and again was the fear of being seen as our true selves. So that's really what we're going to dive into today is how do you first of all, acknowledge that fear. And then how do you find ways to move through it and still make action?
Totally. And what we've noticed in working with people one on one or workshops or retreats is so many people have this, right? This fear of like, but if you know the real me, or if you see me, then what? Uh, and it's completely universal, and yet it's one that we don't talk about,
Yeah, and a big reason we don't talk about it is because we're scared to, right? We don't
right?
want to admit that we're scared and that we're scared of being seen.
Yeah. What does being seen mean to you?
You know, what it ultimately means for me is to just not have to wear a mask throughout the day, right? To be able to share how I'm feeling, to be able to do the things that I want to do. And that seems like really all over the place, but like I want to be able to, here's a great example. Like when I worked at Omega, I realized I don't like overhead lights and I want it to be a really cozy environment. And in the past, I probably would have compromised on those things, but I was able to there. I had my overhead lights off. I brought in a lamp and I also brought in my favorite teacup and teapot. And I would just like throughout the day make myself tea. And it was a little quirky thing that I did. And it was scary to bring it up because I had to have that conversation. I never had felt comfortable enough to do it at any of my PR jobs. And I was like, why? Why are you scared to do that? Like, this will bring you so much joy to get through those hours. And then I would end up having other coworkers over for tea while we had office meeting. It ended up being a really beautiful way to connect. But it was something I was too scared to do in earlier careers.
Well, I think you just kind of nailed it too, is it's quirky, right? And like if it's not going with the norm, like, is it okay? And for us who are neurospicy or don't always go with the norm, there's a lot of life where you are trying to go with the norm um, to to exist, right? And so that fear comes up in things like I need to use a lamp, which may seem really simple to one person, but to another, that's a big deal.
Yeah, and it was so funny because nobody used in my little area of the office. None of us used the overhead lamps. I don't know who made the choice first, but we all quickly were like, "Oh, they're not doing it. I'm not going to do it too. Oh, look." And then people from other departments would come down. They'd be like, "What is going on? Is anyone here?" We'd be like, "Oh, yes, we're here. We're working, but we're doing it in a way that's like comfortable for us."
Okay, first of all, overhead lights should not exist anywhere, particularly in office buildings. They're terrible, they're headache inducing, they buzz, they like do all sorts of things. So 100% on board with this.
And why didn't I do it earlier? Like, come on. How about you? What does it mean for you to be seen fully?
I think it comes to being 100% comfortable in my skin and still being loved.
Mm.
Like that, the who I am, because I think I've always kind of struggled with sometimes how I look on the outside might not be who I am on the inside, right? I think that's probably true for a lot of people. And I think that masking you said is a really really important piece or beautiful piece to examine because I do think there's a lot of times where like if you know the real me who's a weirdo, like I am a weirdo, um, then maybe I'm not lovable. right? And for me, it always comes down to not being lovable. Is like, and I guess that ends up being alone or isolated or whatever trails off of that. But I think it's being seen for like who I am, quirks and all, um, and still being enough. It's the worthiness piece. Right?
I love that both of us said that we were afraid to show our quirkiness
Mhm.
because I know one of the many deep reasons why I love you is because you are quirky and weird. It's like what drew me to you. It's that beautiful light that you always exude. Well, not always, right? We all have bad days, but like you're there. And like I feel like it's your quirks that made us friends
Yeah.
and that do make you so lovable.
Thank you. Well, I think that goes to fitting in too, right? Like I never felt like I was never the person that had like in high school a group like I fit in with, like that was who I was. And I'm not sure anyone really does, right? If we like again like the mask, we could examine that for hours. But there was always this piece of me that just kind of felt like going with different things, like a chameleon. Like I could change into what others wanted me to be or how I thought I should be seen. But to take that off and step out and be like, actually, this is me, um, and I'm still lovable, is the process has been many, many years, right? Like many years. And as you know, as my best friend and business partner, it still comes up for me. Being seen, the fear of being seen comes up again and again, but it's different through the years. It's like I can take the quirk, right? I'm okay with my quirk. It's like the next level of, I don't know, ostracization. Like that's a big jump. I have a little quirk. Don't ostracize me.
Again, right, we're going back to fear, like having fear. And I think sometimes our fears are overblown in our heads. That's like what we discover when we start to show those true sides of ourselves, those quirks, is that not only are we not unlovable, but we're loved even more when we're
Yeah.
able to let them show through.
And that's the irony we always talk about in self love, right? Self love is done in community. And like, so it's the same. The more we're actually seen, the more lovable we actually are, for our true selves. And yet getting over that fear is a stumbling block.
How do you think it shows up for you nowadays?
I think particularly with isolation from COVID and new motherhood, where I had finally kind of gotten myself to do networking events or like, here is what I'm going, like, set goals for myself. While I'm an external processor and have a lot of extrovertness in me, I also have a lot of introvertness in me. And I love my cozy couch. I love my home. Like, I love to be like just cocooned up. And to do that for essentially 4 years has made in present day it more challenging to be in groups of people again, where it is particularly peer to peer. So whether it's, meeting my daughter's friends' parents, like, and trying to figure out how do you have a new friendship with this person that like you don't know, but like you're going to be friends with because your kiddos are like loving each other. Or how to step out into another networking event when I haven't gone in so many years. Like, those are the pieces that bring up more fear now of like, okay, today I'm comfortable in who I am, but like, where do you go with letting people, like, just getting to know new people? I don't know.
Yeah, that makes total sense. Yeah. And I know you were saying this before we hit record, but that you find more fear from that one-on-one or that personal groups instead of like being on stage or doing a great big presentation, which I think is the opposite of a lot of people.
Yeah. Well, I think it's like, and maybe this goes sometimes to the neurospicy pieces, but like, I don't know, always know how to have normal, I'm doing air quotes for those listening, conversations. Like, I'm a person that's always shared more than probably necessary. And one of my quirks that's lovable. But when meeting new people, like if someone asks me a question, I answer very honestly, to a point that is what I have learned, not normal. Like sometimes people lie just to give an easy answer. Like, how are you? Oh, I'm great. How are you? I said, oh, well, it's been really hard lately. I'm tired, but I'm happy because I have everything I've ever wanted. But my business and then like, I don't know how to have normal conversations. On a stage, I have a topic.
Yeah,
Like, this is what we talk about. This is what we're doing. But you put me one on one, and all bets are off. All bets are off.
I can like hear your fears. You're sharing this story.
To my face. I'm like,
But I'm sorry, I'm laughing at it. It's only because I feel you and I understand.
they,
I actually organize a networking group because it's the only way I would go is by hosting it. And even
I'm
then,
learning
every
that.
time beforehand, I'm like, "Ah, do I have to go?" And I'm like, "Yeah, you're hosting it."
But right, what comes out of it is after you host it, because we meet after, you're energized, you're happy, you've made these great connections and talked. And I think that, like, on the other side of fear is almost always, okay, not always a positive experience. I want to, like, very clearly say that. No, like, a lot of things are effing scary for a reason, and they're scary and they're hard and they're painful. But when it comes to the day to day stuff, which I think is some of what we're talking about, is like, we're no longer in the forest fighting off a bear, like to have coffee with someone. It's like not the same reaction. Yet my nervous system doesn't always know that. Like, I my nervous system is like, oh, having a conversation with another human can feel like a bear in the forest.
Yes, yeah, agreed. And when you're neurospicy, it's like you don't even have the right weapons to pacify or subdue the bear. You're just like, "Here I am."
Hi. Which is all about being seen then, because you're
Yeah,
just seen.
yeah.
And it's a take it or leave it. And the truth is we're not everyone's cup of tea, right? Just like not everyone is someone, like, you just don't mesh with everyone. So there is the rejection piece that happens in real life too when you are seen.
And I think that's important to say is that these fears are not irrational, right? It's just these fears also, I refuse to let them stop me from living my life, right? Even though they might have outcomes that aren't what I want, I always feel better so far. I move through the fear, even when it's something like the networking for me, that's a really easy, simple one. It's like I've done it enough times when even if it's a, I'm using air quotes, a bad session, it's still enjoyable enough that like I get something out of it. Or at the worst, it's like an hour and a half of my life, you know, so I can kind of understand that. But there's other situations where they are a lot scarier for me now. And that's like most of where my work is right now, it's around expressing boundaries
Mm.
and particularly expressing boundaries in the relationships with the people that are closest with me, like stating my needs and just being scared that the people that I love um, aren't going to listen to my needs or are going to decide that they don't love me anymore once I say them.
So relatable,
Yeah, right.
right? I mean, like, isn't that the reason we don't set boundaries so often?
I think so. Yeah, I know it is for me. It's the number one reason I don't set boundaries when I should.
Yeah. And when you take all of the people, okay, the people that are closest, that love your quirks, that think they're adorable, that love you so much, and then you have to say out loud, like, something that's happening or something between us isn't working.
Ah,
We need to change that. It's like, for me, it's like, I don't want to push away that person that loves me so much.
exactly. It's like those relationships we've worked so hard for, and like I don't want to do anything that might shake them up in a bad way.
But I think what we've learned, because we use ourselves as examples so much, is that the boundaries within our relationship have actually made us stronger. And I think, that's what we always talk about with boundaries, right? Like, they're not, um, what's that word?
They're not,
Restrictive.
yeah, they're not
Yeah,
restrictive.
they're not restrictive, they're expansive. And the same goes in being seen and loved and walking through the fear of boundaries.
It's so true, and that's exactly what I was gonna say, like, anytime and that's why this is where my current work is, but I feel like I'm doing a good job with it, like, the
Mhm.
conversations that I'm having around boundaries are still really scary to have, so scary to have, but I'm able to be more myself after I have them, I'm able to get my needs met, and more importantly, I'm reminded that the people that love me want me to be supported. Right? Like,
Mhm.
they're not always easy conversations from both sides. It's navigating, it's compromising, but they still get us to a much healthier place. And I think our relationship shows that first and foremost. But I see it in romantic relationships, I see it with other coworkers, with other friends. It's like when I bring up the scary things that aren't working in a relationship, that's when our relationship gets closer.
Totally. And I think with the boundaries goes the needs, right? Like when I'm able to express my needs and when I'm able to do so from a standpoint that's strong within myself of like, I am worthy of this. Like, actually, I know that this is what I need. And it might not make sense to anyone else, but like I'm important enough. And that's taken many years, many, many years, many years, a lifetime to like express that. And I think that's so, it's the same, that same piece, that fear. And I recently had a conversation where like my voice was almost shaking because I was like, I don't want you to take this in a way that makes you feel bad. Like, this is just what I need.
Yeah. And for people listening that are scared still to have the conversation or to be seen, I'll share a story of when I stated a boundary and it wasn't well received, and it actually ended up breaking the relationship. And I felt really good about that too, right? Even though it was really scary to state my need, and even though it caused a break in that relationship, I feel so much freer and so much lighter, and I have so much more space and time for the relationships where that value is equal and where my needs are being listened to and seen and not just heard, but celebrated.
And you deserve celebration.
Yeah, we all do. Yeah.
You
And
do.
it's still scary to have the conversations, but it's think about what's the worst that's going to happen and then do it anyways, because
Do it
that's the
anyway.
worst that's going to happen.
Yeah. And the worst sometimes happens. The worst absolutely sometimes happens. Sometimes we're seen and it comes against us. And yet, what you just said is in the long run, maybe not the short run. So those in the midst of it, like like the short run's often messy. The part of healing, the part of fear, the part of the hard parts of all of this isn't really pretty and it doesn't feel real good. And it's that one step in front of the other, knowing that no matter what, you're okay. And somehow through practice, I think that's how you're able to do more and more.
Every time that you're able to move through your fear and act anyways, you're taking a leap forward in your own personal development, no matter what the outcome is. And that's just working those muscles, getting in that practice and knowing and trusting. It goes back to what you said early of your worth, and then making your actions, no matter how scared you are, to show the world that worth. You're going to start attracting the people that see the worth, celebrate that worth with you. Even if it might take a couple of months, it might take a couple of years, if you just keep making that action, you're going to see the results in a really beautiful way.
And I think super important to note here is we all have that worth within. So even if it's like a mustard seed of worth, like slightly in there, it's actually the action that grows it. So they work together. So if there's just enough to be like, okay, I'm going to do it anyway, that muscle grows, that plant grows, whatever analogy we're going to use.
And just to be clear, the worth inside of you is a gorgeous blazing sun, right? But you might only believe that you have that kernel, right? And it really is through that action that allows us to start stripping away our doubts.
I love that clarification because I was just like, ooh, what does my worth inside look like? And I saw like what if we all like made paintings of our internal worth of what would be there, whether we believe it or not?
Yes. Oh, optional homework. Listen, do it. And then send them to us or post them online and tag us. We want to see them. We should do that. That would be fun.
Yeah, so much fun. I see like bursting flowers.
I just see a great big sun, great big shining sun.
See, like I love that each of us had an automatic thought. So, listeners, tell us what you automatically thought worth would look like internally.
Mm. And then use that image, use that picture to just be brave whatever your next action might be, no matter if it's small, bringing in a teacup to your work, or big, setting some boundaries with some loved ones or unloved ones. And let us know how that goes too.